Clara, stop right there. My mother's voice cut across Christmas dinner before I'd even reached my chair. 21 relatives turned at once. I looked down, already knowing what she had seen. My steel-toe boots were still dusted with grey sight mud from the emergency inspection I'd come from, and one dark print had landed on the edge of her pale imported rug. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I'll take them off." But Mom didn't want an apology. She wanted an audience. Meredith Hayes lifted her wineglass slightly, like she was about to make a toast, then pointed at my feet. "You couldn't even change into real shoes?" she asked, "at Christmas dinner?" My sister Evelyn lowered her eyes with the smallest smile. My father stared into his plate. I bent to unlace one boot, but Mom's voice sharpened. "No, leave them on. Let everyone see what I mean." The room went still. Then she said it. "Blue-collar work humiliates this family." My fingers froze on the laces. The candles flickered between the crystal glasses. The roast sat untouched in the center of the table. Evelyn's promotion to senior associate had been applauded 10 minutes earlier. My cousin's medical residency had earned a standing hug from my mother. But me, Clara Hayes, 29, construction project coordinator, I was being displayed like a stain. "I came straight from Rivergate," I said. "You told me not to be late." Mom laughed once, cold and neat. Rivergate construction sites, work boots, mud on my rug. She looked around the table, making sure everyone heard. "Your grandmother shouldn't have to see her granddaughter dressed like hired labor on what may be her last Christmas in this house." Grandma Rose had been silent until then. She sat near the far end of the table, wrapped in a cream cardigan, one hand resting on her cane. Everyone knew she was moving into assisted living in January. Everyone also knew my mother had been using that fact all evening to control the room. But now Grandma pushed her chair back. Slowly. The legs scraped against the hardwood, and the sound cut through the dining room sharper than any shout. "Rose," Mum warned. Grandma stood anyway. Her eyes stayed locked on my mother. "Should I tell them?" Mom's hand tightened around her wineglass. Grandma Rose tilted her head. "What you used to do." "Sit down, Mother." Meredith said it softly, but the room heard the command underneath. Grandma Rose held her stare for one more second, then eased herself back into the chair. She didn't look defeated. She looked patient, like she had opened a door and was waiting for someone brave enough to walk through it. My mother gave a brittle laugh. "She gets dramatic when she's tired," she said, smoothing her napkin over her lap. "Clara, don't stand there sulking. You've already made enough of a scene." I swallowed the answer burning in my throat. Across the table, Dad cleared his voice. "Let's just eat." That was Richard Hayes in one sentence. If Mom lit the match, Dad opened a window and pretended there wasn't smoke. I stepped into the hallway instead, carrying one of Meredith's linen napkins and wiping mud from the side of my boot. My hands shook hard enough that the napkins snagged on the scuffed leather. Dad followed me. "Clara," he said low, "your mother was harsh." I looked up. "But," he rubbed the back of his neck, "but you know how she is about appearances." "That's not an answer." "It's Christmas, couldn't you have changed?" I was on site because a retaining wall reading came back wrong. She told me if I was late, I'd ruin Grandma's night. Dad's eyes dropped. I asked, "Are you ashamed of me too?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out fast enough. Then my phone buzzed. "Daniel Ortiz, need to flag something. Someone called the office asking if you were qualified to represent Rivergate at Monday's investor signing." My stomach tightened. Another message appeared. "They knew your full name," the site, "and your family's connection to the old Rivergate neighborhood." I looked back toward the dining room. Mom was leaning close to Evelyn, whispering, "This little construction phase needs to end before it damages the Hayes name." At the far end of the table, Grandma Rose tapped one finger beside an old Christmas photo album. "Once." I stepped over, opened it, and found a faded photo tucked inside the front cover. Young Meredith Hayes stood outside a brick mill, wearing work gloves, dusty jeans, and steel-toe boots. I slid the photo into my pocket, just as Mom rose from her chair again. Well, she said, lifting her glass, since the evening has already wandered off course, let's return to what matters. Every face turned toward her. That was how it always worked. Meredith Hayes could insult you, dismiss you, then call everyone back to order like she owned the air. To success, she said. Real success, Evelyn's promotion, Mark's residency, Andrew's new finance position. Glasses lifted around the table. Then her eyes landed on me. And some of us, she added, smiling without warmth, are still finding our way. Something in me snapped cleanly. Did you call Rivergate development? The glasses stopped halfway to mouths. Mom blinked once. Excuse me. Someone called my office tonight, I said. Someone questioned whether I was qualified to be at the investor signing. Evelyn sat up straighter. Clara, don't do this. I'm asking a question. Dad said drop it. Mom gave a tiny laugh. I have no idea what you're talking about. Too quick. Then my phone rang. Daniel Ortiz. I answered before fear could talk me out of it. Daniel, you're on speaker. His voice filled the dining room. Clara, the signing is still on for Monday, but the board wants you there in person. Your name is already attached to the final project package. Mom's smile faltered. What does that mean? She asked. Attached. Daniel paused. Her field reports, redesign timeline and cost recovery plan are listed under the $15 million Rivergate Mill closing documents. A fork clinked against China. Someone whispered, 15 million. Mom's face lost color, then hardened. She must have exaggerated her role. People like that don't close deals. Grandma Rose reached across the table. I handed her the faded photo. She placed it in the center, right between the candles and Mom's untouched wine. Then I suppose, Grandma said, your mother was people like that either. Mom reached for the photo so fast her bracelet struck the rim of her plate. But I got there first. I picked it up and held it against my chest, my thumb pressed over the corner where her younger face stared back at me from another life. She was standing outside Rivergate Mill in faded jeans, hair tied back, work gloves tucked under one arm, boots covered in the same kind of dust she had just called humiliating. Give me that, Mom said. Grandma Rose's voice cut in. No. One word, quiet, final. Mom turned on her. You have no right. I have every right, Grandma said. You worked there one summer after college. Your father had medical bills. We needed money. You wore those boots every day, Meredith. And you were proud of them until you married Richard and decided pride had to look expensive. The room shifted. Not loudly, no one gasped, it was worse than that. People just looked at Mom differently. My phone buzzed again. An email from Daniel appeared with the subject line, complaint follow-up / board record. I opened it. Attached was a screenshot. The sender address was my mother's personal email. My throat tightened as I read one sentence aloud. Clara Hayes lacks the professional image required for investor-facing representation. Aunt Denise whispered, Meredith. My cousin Mark leaned back. You called her job. Dad stared at Mom like he was seeing the dinner table from the other side for the first time. Mom lifted her chin. I was protecting the family name. No, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You were protecting a lie. Another message from Daniel came through. Board needs your written confirmation before Monday that no personal conflict affects your role. We have to document this. Official. Permanent. I looked at Mom. I'll give them the truth. Before she could answer, Grandma Rose reached into the photo album and pulled open a second hidden envelope. Across the front in faded ink was one word. Rivergate. Grandma Rose laid the envelope on the table like it weighed more than paper. Meredith, she said, you spent 30 years acting like shame could be inherited. All you did was pass it down to Clara. Mom didn't move. Grandma opened the envelope and pulled out old pay stubs, yellowed at the edges, then a newspaper clipping, then another photo. In this one, Mom was 22, holding a hard hat outside Rivergate Mill, smiling like the dust on her clothes belonged there. Grandma tapped the pay stubs. You worked manual jobs after college because Richard's family wouldn't help us and your father's bills were drowning us. Those boots paid your rent, they bought groceries, they kept you standing. Dad looked at Mom. Meredith, why didn't you ever tell me? Mom's mouth opened but no answer came. Grandma slid the newspaper clipping toward me. It showed the partial demolition of Rivergate Mill decades ago. Same brick arches, same west wall, same place I'd been inspecting before Christmas dinner. I looked at my mother, and everything finally fit. You knew Rivergate, I said. That's how you knew what project to call about. Mom's jaw tightened. I turned to the table. Rivergate Mill is being redeveloped into commercial space. During a site walk, I found water damage hidden behind a load-bearing section the first survey missed. If we'd kept building, the wall could have failed. Investors would have pulled out. The company would have been buried in lawsuits. No one interrupted. I coordinated the engineers, rewrote the construction sequence, negotiated the revised timeline with the subcontractors, and documented the cost recovery plan. That's why my name is on the $15 million closing package, not because someone gave me credit, because my work protected the deal. Evelyn's polished smile was gone. Cousin Mark stared at his plate. Clara, I'm sorry, I laughed earlier. Aunt Denise pushed her chair back slightly, like she needed distance from Mom. Dad's voice cracked. Meredith, you called our daughter's job. Mom gripped the stem of her wineglass. She embarrassed me, showing up here like that. I looked down at my boots, then back at her. No, I said, you embarrassed yourself by forgetting who wore them first. By Monday morning, I sent the board my written confirmation and disclosed the complaint exactly as it happened. Daniel didn't bury it. At the investor signing, he introduced me as the project lead whose field judgment saved Rivergate Mill. When the development company posted the announcement, my name was right there beside the $15 million agreement. The family saw it. So did Mom's charity committee. Within a week, 2 committee members stepped back from her fundraiser. Evelyn stopped making jokes about my construction phase. Dad came by the site one afternoon in dress shoes, stood awkwardly near the gate, and asked me to show him what I actually did. Mom lost the thing she valued most, control over the story. I gained something I had spent years begging for and finally stopped needing. Months later, I framed that old photo of Mom in steel-toe boots and hung it in my office, not as revenge, as evidence. Because the truth survives, even when people bury it. And I walked onto the next job site with my boots dusty, my name on the deal, and nothing left to prove.